This is the LG V30, direct successor to last year's V20, though now with an all-new design that has much more in common with the super widescreen LG G6. Though it's still got dual rear cameras, some high-end sound hardware, and a focus on content creation, will fans of the V-series be upset by the absence of the secondary screen? I'm Steven Check with PhoneArena, here to show you how this phone tries to stay true to its roots while also embracing an all-new design as I review the LG V30.
Like a lot of smartphone manufacturers, LG is putting aside familiar design language in 2017 so that it can work on something new, and got the ball rolling back in February with the launch of the G6, with its impressive face-covering 18:9 aspect ratio screen. Slowly but surely, screens like that are becoming the norm for the very highest-end phones around, so it's little surprise that for the successor to the V20, LG has dramatically redesigned its hardware to accommodate another such expansive display. That's not a move without consequence though, and right away the biggest departure from the V10 and V20 strikes you like a bullet. There's no more secondary screen. While those phones had little subscreens nestled above the primary display, where users could access shortcuts and receive notifications, the V30 is all one screen, though admittedly a very big one, measuring in at 6 inches. Despite the size of that display, the phone itself doesn't feel huge, and is only slightly larger than the G6, and surprisingly it's even thinner. Though the design here has a lot in common with that earlier year LG flagship, a number of refinements are easily visible, and chief among those are the V30's curved edges, helping to reduce the impact of the phone's size even further. While those edges are metal, this year LG's dropping the metal back in favor of a glass surface. That could be controversial, as we also lose the V20's removable battery in the process, but for every door that closes, a window opens. While you can't swap in a new battery at a moment's notice, the V30 does pick up native support for wireless charging. We'll talk about that more in just a moment. Another benefit of the new construction is water resistance, and the V30 scores an IP68 rating against dust and water damage. Circling back to the phone's screen, LG gives us another curved corner 18:9 display just like we saw on the G6, again with a 1440 by 2880 resolution. But unlike the G6's panel, LG is moving from LCD to P-OLED for the V30. That gives it some bold colors, and even if accuracy isn't stellar, content still looks really nice. Brightness is also good, nothing exceptional but not at all disappointing either. At least that's true overall, but there is a problem with uniformity. For some reason, the screen here doesn't exhibit consistent brightness across the entire panel, and there are splotchy areas of dimmer output. It's more noticeable in certain situations than others, and while it's not so bad as to ruin the V30 experience for us, it's nonetheless pretty embarrassing for LG. With a screen this big, there's simply no room for a secondary display, but LG still has you covered and goes a long way towards making up for that feature's absence with the availability of a new floating bar in the V30 software. This hides as a bubble along the side of the screen and is called out with a tap, at which point it gives you a very similar experience to what you'd get from the secondary screen. Customizable app shortcuts, favorite contacts, and the works. The rest of the phone's interface is largely what we saw on the G6, which is to say a clean take on Android that strikes a nice balance towards unique layout while also keeping things familiar enough to stay functional. When the G6 landed in early 2017, the Snapdragon 835 chip that's been at the heart of so many recent flagships wasn't yet quite ready for prime time. That's changed by now, and the V30 is equipped with just such a processor, and as a result feels smoother and more responsive to use. LG pairs that with 4GB of RAM as well as 64GB storage with the option for microSD expansion. There's also a 128GB edition of the phone, but for some reason LG's given it slightly different branding as the V30 Plus. Here in the US, you'll find that option at Sprint and US Cellular. Speaking of carriers, you can track down either the V30, the V30 Plus, or both editions at all the major networks. And if you're the loner rebel type and you're hankering for an unlocked handset, pre-orders have just opened, though you will be waiting until December before you can take the phone home. As we mentioned earlier, this year the V30 loses its removable battery, but picks up wireless charging. We're not sure that's a zero-sum equation, but our main concern is just how long the embedded 3300 mAh battery lasts. The news, thankfully, is good, and in our custom battery test, we clocked over 9.5 hours of screen on time before running out of power. Recharging takes about 2 hours with the included wired charger, but expect that figure to climb if you do go the wireless route. LG's been big on audio hardware with the V-series so far, and that trend continues for the most part with the V30. There's another quad DAC on board for high-fidelity sound output, but you're going to need to be using headphones to really tap into that power. Thankfully, the faithful analog jack lives on here. And while the phone has some really nice audio recording options, supporting HD audio and avoiding signal peaks with its acoustic overload protection mics, we wish on-phone playback was a little more fleshed out, as the V30's single bottom-edge speaker sounds a little bit lightweight and is really hurting for more bass. Finally, we're turning our attention to one of the big selling points of the V-series, the camera. Just like on the V20 as well as the G6, we're looking at the pairing of a wide-angle camera alongside a more traditional narrow-angle lens. While there was a not insignificant disparity last year between the 16-megapixel main camera and the 8-megapixel wide-angle shooter, the V30 takes steps to even the playing field, bumping the wide-angle resolution up to the same 13 megapixels we got with the G6. We're also looking at wider apertures this year, helping to gather more light, as well as lens improvements that minimize distortion for wide-angle shots. As for using the cameras, it's easy to get some great-looking pics out of this hardware. Switching between the cameras is quick and simple, and although the narrow-angle camera is a little more versatile, the wide angle causes a lot fewer problems this year in low-light environments. Shooting in auto mode will get you solid results most of the time, and the worst problems we ran into were overexposed shots. There's also a powerful manual mode, and that gets a real boost with the V30 through integration with Graphy. This is great for if you don't have a clue where to start with manual photography. You just choose a sample image that looks like the kind of pic you're trying to get, and the phone loads the appropriate camera settings. It even points you in the right direction of the options you'll want to tweak to accommodate for your scene's unique lighting conditions. The 5-megapixel front facer is also decent, though its wide-angle mode is decidedly less useful and also less wide than the rear cameras. Video recording is just as pleasant to use and capable of producing high-quality output as stills, supporting filming up to 4K in a variety of resolutions, including a couple 18:9 options that generate videos the perfect shape for playback on the V30 screen. You have access to both cameras during filming and can jump back and forth between them on demand. New this year are some software effects delivered under the Cine Video banner. One, Cine Effects allows you to apply color grading filters to your video. Some of those are subtle, others outlandish, and all can be adjusted in terms of their intensity. They're a fun distraction, but none of them are super useful. What's a little bit cooler is a feature called Point Zoom, which lets you tap a region on the screen and then perform a controlled zoom in on the action. A slider lets you adjust the speed and direction of that zoom effect. It can produce some professional-looking results, but video quality understandably degrades the further you zoom in. Still, the whole package is pretty impressive, and fans of the cameras on the V20 will absolutely not feel let down.
While the V30 is a big departure from the V20 in terms of hardware, the soul of the smartphone series is still very much present, and upon using the V30, there's little doubt that this model continues to hit all the same strong points as its predecessors, while also showing off a new, modern design. Yes, there are some issues with screen quality, and when you're spending north of $800 on a phone, you might not want to compromise on that. But if you can get past that, the V30 represents a solid upgrade over the G6, and in a lot of ways is the phone we wish that model were. Right now, it's the best smartphone LG has to offer, and represents an attractive alternative to pricier ultra-widescreen phones. I'm Steven Shank with PhoneArena. Thanks for watching, and be sure to subscribe so you don't miss any upcoming videos in the days and weeks ahead.